World, and welcome to Caravan to Midnight, June 8th, 2017. And you know, we are now celebrating, well, some of us are. I'm not celebrating, but it is being celebrated. What, you may ask? Well, the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the release of that album. Genius work, mostly by George Martin. Because I'm telling you, if you hear some of those raw Beatles songs, just, we want to try out a song, so we'll all play it together, And so you listen to it, you go, yeah. And then you hear the version that was finished, thoroughly produced by George Martin, and it's one of your favorite hits. You got to have a good producer, otherwise you don't get to be icons. Well, we're also celebrating the 50th anniversary of a war crime, and it is a war crime. This is from ussliberty.org, a report, War Crimes Committed Against the U.S. Military Personnel, June 8th, 1967. Submitted to the Secretary of the Army in his capacity as Executive Agent for the Secretary of Defense, June 8, 2005. On June 8, 1967, while patrolling in international waters in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, USS Liberty, AGTR-5, was savagely attacked without warning or justification by air and naval forces of the State of Israel. Of a crew of 294 officers and men, including 3 civilians, the ship suffered 34 killed in action, 173 wounded in action. The ship itself, a $40 million state-of-the-art signals intelligence platform, was so badly damaged it never sailed again on an operational mission, and was sold in 1970 for $101,666.66. A lot of sixes in there. 101. There's your 11, right? If you take out the 0. And then 666, the evil number. Israel acknowledged the following facts without qualification. The USS Liberty was an American ship, hence a neutral vis-a-vis the June 1967 war between Israel and its Arab neighbors. USS Liberty remained in international waters at all times. On June 8, 1967, the attacking Israeli forces never made a positive identification of the nationality of the USS Liberty before unleashing deadly force in their attack on the ship. But that's not true, because at least one of the pilots said, "That's a U.S. ship. Proceed to target," was the order. Now, there may have been more than one pilot, but one pilot said no and returned to his base and wound up in prison for a long time. At approximately 0600 hours, all times local, on the morning of June 8, 1967, an Israeli maritime reconnaissance aircraft observer reported seeing a U.S. Navy cargo-type ship just outside the coverage of the Israeli coastal radar defense net, bearing the hull markings GTR-5. This report, made to Israeli Naval Headquarters, was also forwarded immediately to the Israeli Navy Intelligence Directorate. Throughout the remainder of the day prior to the attack, Israeli reconnaissance aircraft regularly flew out to the USS Liberty's position and orbited the ship before returning to their bases in Israel. A total of no fewer than 8 such flights were made. At approximately 10:50 hours, the naval observer from the early morning reconnaissance flight arrived at Israeli Air Force headquarters and sat down with the air naval liaison officers there. The 2 officers consulted Jane's fighting ships and learned that the ship reported earlier in the day was USS Liberty, a United States Navy technical research ship. From 0900 hours on June 8, 1967 until the time of the attack, 5 hours later, USS Liberty maintained a speed of approximately 5 knots and a generally westerly-northwesterly course. At 1400 hours, that's 2 in the afternoon, while approximately 17 miles off the Gaza coast, USS Liberty's crew observed 3 surface radar contacts closing with their position at high speed. A few moments later, the bridge radar crew observed high-speed aircraft passing over the surface, returns on the same heading. Within a few short moments and without any warning, Israeli fighter aircraft launched a rocket attack on USS Liberty. The aircraft made repeated firing passes, attacking Liberty with rockets and their internal cannons. After the first flight, the fighter aircraft had exhausted their ordnance. Subsequent flights of Israeli fighter aircraft continued to prosecute the attack with rockets, cannon fire, and napalm. During the air attack, USS Liberty's crew had difficulty contacting 6th Fleet to request assistance due to intense communications jamming. The initial targets on the ship were the command bridge, communications antennas, and the 450 caliber machine guns placed on the ship to repel boarders. After the Israeli fighter aircraft completed their attacks, 3 Israeli torpedo boats arrived and began a surface attack about 35 minutes after the start of the air attack. The torpedo boats launched a total of 5 torpedoes, one of which struck the side of USS Liberty opposite the ship's research spaces. 26 Americans, in addition to the 8 who had been killed in the earlier air attacks, were killed as a result of this explosion. If you want to read the whole thing, it's on the site, ussliberty.org/report/report.htm. But I will continue just a little bit more. The defenseless crew, initially unable to report their plight or summon assistance, and with only themselves to rely upon, fought heroically to save themselves and their ship. In recognition of their effort in this single action, they were ultimately awarded collectively 1 Medal of Honor, 2 Navy Crosses, 11 Silver Stars, 20 Bronze Stars with V device, 9 Navy Commendation Medals, and 204 Purple Hearts. In addition, the ship was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. And the word is that after all these years, our government is still trying to cover it up because the Israelis really want it covered up. No one has satisfactorily explained to anyone why the ship was attacked, even after it was identified as a United States naval vessel. Oh, yeah. You know, there's been a lot of tiptoeing around the Israeli-Jewish thing altogether. And I've said it before, I know many lovely Jews, men and women. Even dated a couple of Jewish girls way back in the day. Nice ladies. They were very nice girls. But when you read these things that have happened over the years, and you go to your Bible and you go, okay, the grace of the Lord, meaning God, is upon the Gentiles now. It was on the Jews. Now it's on the Gentiles, the non-Jewish. But at some point in the future, it will return. The grace of the Lord will be upon the Jews again. Jesus was a Jew, the King of the Jews. Okay? Understood. If you curse Israel, I'll curse you. You know that thing. Well, you don't want to be cursed by God. I think that's an extraordinarily bad position to take. So what are we to make of all of this? Because there are Zionists, and they are Jewish, and I'm sure some Israelis too. But this seems to be a different cut altogether. So we know of the Holocaust. Some people say it never happened. Other people say, well, of course it happened. And I noticed as a kid, when a whole series of the Nuremberg trials was put on television, I can remember one of the witnesses was talking about the ambulance, over and over again. He mentioned that word and pronounced it that way. And everybody was, oh, it's a terrible thing. It is a terrible thing. The annihilation of a bunch of people like that, a group, a genocide, it's a terrible thing. Even if, which is a stretch, you think such a thing is justified. Like the Hittites, they were supposed to be rubbed out, but apparently weren't. Oh well. So anytime you target a group of people for criticism or vilification, let alone extinction through annihilation, you better tread carefully, because no one can know everything, Can they? But we have eyes and we have ears and we have our own thoughts. And so, when you go to neonetal.com and you read this, Jacob Rothschild accidentally admits the New World Order is finished. Rothschild Empire is looking at financial turmoil. Lord Jacob Rothschild has accidentally admitted that the plan for the New World Order is collapsing according to a new report. Rothschild's empire is now looking at fresh financial turmoil as suggested by the RIT Capital Partners 2016 year-end report, which could also have a huge effect for the rest of the planet. Jacob Rothschild also recently announced that he is to buy up all remaining gold to replace stock market and currency exposure, which signals the biggest financial crash since the Lehman Brothers crash in '08. The freethoughtproject.com reports the investment banker's chosen word of period seems to indicate a coming turndown in profitability, even though for the past 5 years the fund has realized a profit of more than 1 billion euros. According to the report, Rothschild and his very powerful family have a vested interest in preserving their assets. Quote, RIT Capital Partners plc is an investment company listed on the London Stock Exchange. Its net assets have grown from 280 million on the listing in '88 to over 2.7 billion today. RIT is chaired by Lord Rothschild, whose family interests retain a significant holding. That's the quote. The issue reveals, if the fund whose value is at and then it stops. Oh, and then it picks up again. Suddenly declines. Falling with it will be a large portion of wealth of the Rothschild family. Although any such declines would hardly come as a surprise to the Rothschild family, who reportedly controls much of the world's wealth and has a hand in nearly all of the world's banking institutions, including the Federal Reserve, as some have stated. The chairman's statement continues with what some might say is an ominous and uncertain view of the future. Quote, since the last World War, we have enjoyed some 70 years of patiently crafted international cooperation, which is now threatened. An apparent reference to Brexit and the UK's referendum to withdraw from the European Union. Against this deeply worrying geopolitical situation, he wrote, seeming to highlight the potential of World War III if the Syrian conflict continues, one can point to a number of positive investment factors. Echoing many statements made by the current U.S. President, Lord Rothschild stated he was hopeful corporations would receive a break in government-imposed revenue. He said, in the U.S., the proposed tax reduction for companies and individuals was a favorable policy change for his fund's portfolio. And he went on to talk about, well, it's written here, the banking and financial baron also seemed to lament that wage increases up by some 4% over the last few months, a factor which affects the bottom line for every company. He also states, across the fund's portfolio will also be affected by rising interest rates. Poor writing. It's kind of discombobulated. But you know, even the best of publications don't seem to be able to keep track of their sentences sometimes. Here's the quote, valuations are set at the high end of their historical range. Inflation is returning, and in these circumstances, it is likely that interest rates in the U.S. will rise meaningfully. And coming from the man whose familial connections and financial partners control the Federal Reserve, he should know. Now, this is Gefira, GEFIRA.org. Global analysis from the European perspective, preparing for the world of tomorrow. Cerberus 2.0 predicts with scientific precision the disappearance of the Dutch population. A change in demographic trends takes 50 years before they become plainly visible. The decline in fertility in the 60s started to become visible after 50 years. Cerberus, our population simulator, shows with scientific precision that the replacement of the European society has started, and within 50 years it will be visible and irreversible. Since the 70s of the previous century, the Western societies have not produced enough offspring to keep their communities growing. The fertility rate is far below 2.1, the level of replacement. A population with a higher rate will grow, while a population with a lower rate will shrink. As it is, the Western and Japanese societies will begin to implode 40 years from the moment their fertility rate dropped. And this demographic winter, as this phenomenon is sometimes called, will affect the world more profoundly than the climate change. So politicians and investors should take notice. Now get this. According to official state data, the Swedish, French, and Dutch populations will keep growing for the foreseeable future despite their low fertility rates. Western politicians seem to be taking great pleasure in the population decline in Russia, but shouldn't they first bother about their own turf? How, for example, is it possible that the number of residents in the Netherlands keeps growing if the number of the newborns is smaller and smaller? To get an insight into the European situation, the Gefira team developed Cerberus 2.0, a software tool that, using copious amounts of demographic data provided by the Central Bureau of Statistics, simulates the population development. Cerberus, making use of the CBS Dutch Central Bureau of Statistics data, calculates how many people died and were born for every consecutive year from 1950 till 2100, and then creates a hypothetical Dutch population growth model without migration. This model overlaps with the official data up to 1980. In the 60s, the Netherlands had an emigration surplus. More people left the country than arrived, while in the 70s the so-called mass migration set in and the process was reversed. Cerberus proves that the Netherlands needs 45,000 immigrants to meet the official projections of the CBS. The CBS data is the basis for governmental planning. The Dutch planners keep the mass immigration unchanged for the foreseeable future instead of anticipating a sharp drop in population. Apparently, the Dutch establishment opts for the replacement of the Dutch society. Since the demographic decline is observable in all Western countries, we are in for Europeans being gradually replaced by peoples from Africa or South Asia. We are now at the 11th hour, and if we do not put an immediate stop to all immigration, the Dutch society will vanish into thin air. Now, Christopher Ingraham of the Washington Post wrote on AJC.com, the Worth County Sheriff ordered pat-down searches for every student at a public high school. Now they're suing. That's in Sylvester, Georgia. They filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against their county sheriff, and after he ordered what the complaint describes as a school-wide drug sweep involving pat-down searches of hundreds of teenagers. But this sort of thing wasn't necessary before we began busing. Let me tell you what happened in East Fort Worth. My parents had a house on Normandy Drive, and they passed away. But before, Dad passed away in 2001, Mom passed away in 2005. In 2005, the entire neighborhood, it was a nice street, nicely paved, everything's fine, yards are neat, cars parked in driveways, not always in the garage. The cars were left out. Kids playing, everybody polite, everything neat, everything trim. When I drove through there, after Mom had been with us for a couple of months, I was frankly horrified at what had happened to that neighborhood. Yes, the African Americans had taken over. Now, for any black folk in the audience, just take it easy, because you know exactly what I'm talking about, and don't pretend that you don't. And I know you won't, because you're watching the program, and I've told you before, everybody can't be painted with the same brush. We're not talking about individuals now, we're talking about groups. This street is about a half a mile long. It's a long street. From Muse down to Sandy Lane. And in fact, if you go east on Normandy to Sandy Lane, and you make a right, and you go through Meadowbrook Drive, and you head on down, the next thing you're going to hit is East Lancaster Avenue, otherwise known as Highway 80. On your right is Rose Hill Memorial Cemetery. And buried there is Lee Harvey Oswald. That's another thing when people ask me about interesting coincidences where myself and the Kennedy incident are concerned. Yep, Lee's buried down the street from where my parents lived and where I lived for a while as a kid. Okay. Black people sitting around on virtually all of the porches. Happenings of the loud variety until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Even the ones next door to my parents took out a section of fence and were so stupid they left the hammer on their side of the fence. After a section had been removed, they ran off with the TV and they ran off with this because there wasn't anybody there then. So they even ran off with a 215 cubic inch Oldsmobile aluminum V8 that was in the back of Dad's garage. The whole place looked like, I don't know, Rwanda, just before the big happenings there, where tens of thousands were killed before sunrise, by other black people, by the way. The white supremacists had nothing to do with it. Now, I don't know what happened, but a couple of years went by, that house was sold, and obviously, Mom, before she moved out there, was getting knocks on the front door in the middle of the night. Little did they know, she was standing on the other side of one of those doors holding a revolver. And she informed them that if you don't get away from the door, I'm going to let a round off through the door. So they left. That happened a couple of times. Cops didn't show up. Cops were called, but, they were busy, for sure. East Fort Worth used to be absolutely idyllic. Now it looks like an atomic bomb went off there, and nobody knows it. It's weird. It's like Twilight Zone. Everything is pretty much still standing, but it looks just weird. And you hardly see any people at all. When all of this started, all this busing and so forth started, I told you I was going to get into this yesterday, and this is a rough subject. It's going to hurt some people's feelings. They're just going to have to deal with it because facts are facts. And facts trump hurt feelings. Something happened, and a couple of years later, I couldn't imagine that this was going to go on, but it went on for quite a long time. So I didn't even go back there for a couple of years. But then I decided to take a look and see how much worse it had gotten. And it hadn't gotten worse. Because every one of those people that were sitting on those porches were gone. They had taken a nice neighborhood, turned it into squalor, and something happened over there, but those people were gone when I went through there, and the neighborhood was restored to its former, I'm not going to say glory, but its former order. It was an appealing street again. Now, we started all of this busing in the 70s. And what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened, because I lived it. The schools began being armored. When I was a kid, you could go to any of those schools and you'd find a door open somewhere. You'd go and walk around the school on the weekend. Nobody cared because only an idiot would vandalize or steal anything. Out of a graduating class of about 300 people, maybe 3 or 4 of them were just, they were going to be criminals. It was just in their genetic code. They were just idiots. There's no telling what they were dealing with at home at all. But even they didn't do any, crime, hardcore crime. They just didn't. The older boys who were 18 drove their pickup trucks to school because it was cool to have a pickup truck. You could go off-road in it. You could go camp in it. Go park in it, man. Take your girlfriend and go park in it. Had their rifles or a shotgun up in the back window in a rifle rack. Nobody stole it. Nobody took it away. Nobody shot at anybody with it. But he left it alone because people understood. You don't go over to somebody's vehicle and mess with their firearm. You'll get in some serious trouble. And if they send you to jail, you will not have a workout room or cable TV or any of that. It'll be a jail. And so people stayed out of trouble. So what's happened as we decided we were going to blend the cultures is we've brought people into civilized society that will not even pick up the Sierra Hotel India Tango from their own front yards. Now, many of them will. And the ones who won't criticize them and vilify them and threaten them and many times kill them. Why? for being too white. Even though their skin is as black as a raven black Ford Mustang that was painted Ford Raven Black, this particular black family is just a little bit too white. And I know of many instances in which black people were persecuted by other black people for trying to get with the program. Their kids were neat, their yards were neat, their cars were neat, their homes were in order, mom and dad lived there together, kids lived there too, family was solid. They got picked on by other black people. Bad. White people around them didn't even notice that their skin tone was a different color. They didn't even notice. Nobody used any ethnic slurs. Oh, Texas, man, they just use the N-word all the time. That's just not true. That's another left-wing lie, because left-wingers are liars. The ones that call themselves progressives are liars. The collectivists, the Marxists, the communists, the Antifas, they're liars. They're the trash and scum of the earth. I have spoken. I mean it, and I will not be issuing a retraction. Not unless their behavior changes quickly and in a believable fashion, because they're liars. So it's going to take quite a bit now for me to believe anything they say, particularly when it comes to their own reformation. Okay? Now it gets worse. What was the big idea? Well, we'll send white kids over to the scary black side of town to go to school, and we'll send the black kids over to the nice part. And that way it'll all blend, it'll average out somehow. No, that did not happen. They cannot raise them up. All they who would be raised up can do is pull the ones at the top down. And you see it happening all around. Witness the poverty. Witness the bankruptcy. Witness the poor conditions of Democrat-controlled cities. Almost without exception. 7 out of 10 of this country's poorest cities are run by Democrats. Oh, Chicago. What a great town Chicago started out to be. A great town. Then the criminals got their hooks in the 20s and 30s, and not much has changed. It just got worse and worse and worse. Everybody skimming off the top. Everybody getting what's theirs. I'm talking about up at the top. I'm not talking about the poor mugs down at the bottom that are actually doing the work. I'm talking about the ones who run it. Daley, Emmanuel, blah, blah, blah. And what did that city spawn? More left-wing maniacs. Alinsky, Clinton, Ayers, pick one. And the way the government is run is very much the way the gangland Chicago conducted its political activities. Somebody gets too far out of line, throw them in the weeds. Seth Rich is a perfect example, okay? Or are you saying Chicago's the only city with any crime? Don't be a moron. Of course I'm not saying that. I'm using it as a symbol of the degradation of this chunk of Western civilization. Okay, when Giuliani, whatever he knew about 9/11, I suspect he knew quite a bit. He cleaned up New York City. Under Koch, a total poop hole. It was, and New Yorkers know it. Giuliani was good for New York. Revitalized it, rejuvenated it, and for the most part, fixed it. And that's a big town. It's not easy to just go, oh, I'll just come in and take over and fix it. The cities that are run by Democrats, look at the mayor of L.A. He's now openly calling, effectively, he is openly calling, well, he's afraid that, with Trump arresting the illegal alien criminals, that it might cause a tinderbox. You don't cause a tinderbox. You have a tinderbox, and a spark sets it off. So straighten out your speech there, pal. Might find a situation where you want to resist, to keep that person from being taken, and it puts the officers in trouble, and it puts the ICE agents in trouble, and all that. Yeah, well, no, criminals put us in trouble, fool. And the only reason that the law enforcement officers and federal officers are in peril is because of people like you. Now, what is the big agenda? Sweden The white girls getting raped all over the place. Austria, same thing. Germany, same thing. England, same thing. The disgusting thing about England is a lot of the white girls and boys are being raped by other white people who are in government. And people like Jimmy Savile, the freaky-looking so-called comedian who looks like some sort of a spook straight out of the backside of hell. But I digress. We're talking now about an invasion. And Khan, Sadiq Khan, he's not going to use the term Islamic extremism. He's not going to use the term Islamic terrorism. Well, let me ask you a question. Are the Baptists terrorizing anybody? How about the Episcopalians, the Methodists, the Lutherans, the Presbyterians? Any of them? Any of the Protestant churches waging an Occidental version of jihad on anybody? Well, we're in the Middle East blowing them up. Not talking about that. I'm talking about out in the street. I'm talking about in cities. Do you see hordes of white people invading places in, where? I know, Mexico, or Africa, or Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, India. See any mass invasions by white people raping the local citizens there and demanding money and asylum and all kinds of perks? I don't think so. I'm going to go here to a site called the OccidentalObserver.net. Now, this person is named Dr. Lasha Darkmoon. That's clearly not this person's name. And there's nothing to suggest that it's other than the first name, could easily be a man as well as a woman, right? You never know. And this Dr. Lasha Darkmoon is not going to be interviewed and is not going to talk to anybody over the phone and is going to stick to just the words. But I want to read a little bit of this to you. It starts off with, Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz recently remarked that Europe was on the brink of a cataclysmic event. What could this be? On the face of it, Stiglitz appears to be predicting the imminent death of Europe, but this is deceptive. Europe is not going anywhere. It'll still be Europe as long as its individual states remain intact. What Stiglitz is predicting is the death of the idea of a future federalist pan-European superstate. A multilingual leviathan with a single currency, the euro, and no border controls between its individual statelets. The continental superstate, the United States of Europe, is seen as an analog to the United States of America. Stiglitz makes his gloomy prediction because he is disappointed by Brexit, the momentous decision of the British people to set free themselves from the tentacles of the European superstate. Stiglitz fears that other nations in the EU bloc could get similar dangerous ideas. With Brexit, 17 million people said no to being ruled over by autocratic foreigners in another country, many of them unelected bureaucrats of dubious provenance and with repugnant ideologies. Quentin Letts writes in his Saturday essay for the Daily Mail, revealing how momentous words of the BBC announcer "We're out" almost made him freak out when he first heard the good news at 4:40 a.m. on Friday, June 24th. Today, October 1, 2016, is exactly 100 days since Britain voted to leave the European Union. I sat on my bed and burst into tears of joy. Our country has voted to escape the alien prison of Brussels and its anti-democratic commission. We are free. Now, Stiglitz and his kind would not have approved the upsurge of populist sentiment symbolized by Brexit, obviously believing that referenda should only be taken seriously when the votes of the masses coincide with the special interests of the ruling elite. We're talking here about the clash between two completely incompatible worldviews. Between those two, on the one hand, believe that nation-states are important and should retain their sovereignty and border controls, and those who, on the other hand, believe passionately that nation-states are not important and should be phased out of existence. The latter group, who wield great influence right now, believe that nationalist sentiments are to be discouraged and that nationalism is an unmitigated evil. To this very powerful elite, in which the Jews happen to find themselves ensconced among the upper echelons, it is cosmopolitan internationalism that matters. It's worth pointing out that Stiglitz himself belongs to the Jewish elite, so it comes as no surprise to learn that he should disapprove of Brexit. After all, Brexit was a collective cri de coeur, cry of heart, for national sovereignty. It was a complete rejection of cosmopolitan internationalism and federal superstates such as the United States of Europe. Only when there is a one-world government, it is argued passionately by the anti-nationalists, will there be peace on earth. It is not competition that is needed, it is cooperation. The idea being pushed is that we are all one big human family and must learn to live in peace and beat our swords into plowshares. We must all pull in the same direction. The Jews even have a neat phrase to describe what is needed and longed for intensely as the ultimate goal of humanity. Tikkun olam in Hebrew, meaning literally the repair of the world. The world can only be repaired, it is maintained, when nation-states are abolished, when people are free to wander through the new earthly paradise without borders or passports, to live where they want, work where they want, and marry whom they want across the racial divide. Now, here's the important part. It goes without saying that Jews have always been in the vanguard of the cosmopolitan internationalist movements, or the push for one world government. Who can deny this? Let's start with Soros, the Jewish Nazi. Okay? Quote, "We will have a world government whether you like it or not," Jewish banker James Paul Warburg told the U.S. Senate on February 17, 1950. The only question is whether that government will be achieved by conquest or consent. The mongrelization of man is not something to be deplored, these people aver. It is something devoutly to be wished, the mongrelization of man. For how can racism ever rear its ugly head again in a world without races? When perfect mongrelization is achieved, it is argued, everyone will be truly equal. With the disappearance of races and nationalist ethnic groups, IQ disparities will disappear, and there will no longer be any shame about belonging to an inferior IQ group. Most people will be intellectually homogeneous, all the same, apart from the elite masterclass, which will make sure that the rule of intellectual homogeneity applies only to the masses. With genetic advancements, there will no longer be any excessively fat or thin people, or any exceptionally ugly or beautiful people to make the ugly feel envious. Everyone will be uniformly slim and brown, light coffee brown in the northern hemisphere, and dark chocolate brown south of the equator to make allowances for the long-term effects of the tropical sun. In the ironic words of Christian Miller, the end result will be a utopia of mocha-skinned beauties. The human family will then at last be at peace. No one need fight anyone anymore. No one need rob anyone, because we'll all be one big human family where everything belongs to everyone equally. Tikkun olam will then usher in utopia, heaven on earth. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. To quote Christian Miller again, egalitarians claim the race problem will disappear if the traditionally white nations assimilate and interbreed with non-white populations. Some imagine this will produce a utopia of brown-skinned beauties, society without race, by homogeneous default. Others will recognize this scenario as the systematic eradication of the white race, or white genocide. There are, of course, other complications. Some people will need to rule over the human family, just as parents rule and look after their children, and so the rulers will need to belong to a superior caste. Though all men will theoretically be equal in the New World Order, some in practice will need to be more equal than others. These superior beings will enact the role of benevolent dictators, governing the rest of mankind in loco parentis. These will be the people farmers, to coin a phrase, and the people will be their livestock. Who are the people farmers? We will now deal with this question in detail and show how it's linked to mass immigration, multiculturalism, and indirectly to the current rape epidemic in Germany, Sweden, and other European countries. We can be sure of one thing: the ongoing migrant crisis in Europe appears to be a carefully planned catastrophe, not an unfortunate incident, let alone accident. It has been on the cards for decades, ever since Count Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi, an Austro-Hungarian aristocrat whose mother was Japanese, arrived on the scene in the early 1920s and established the Pan-European Union, the prototype for the United States of Europe. This was to be a multicultural superstate populated by mongrelized Europeans, according to the Count, who was himself a mongrel. Moreover, it was to be under Jewish rule, or rather, under a mandarinate of elite Jews and enlightened support groups of non-Jewish philo-Semitic foot soldiers who believed as passionately as the Jews did in Tikkun Olam and the establishment of a one-world government. After World War I, the Jews were increasingly seen as the natural-born aristocrats of a new and resurgent Europe, the replacement for the effete and moribund Christian aristocracy of the ancient regime that had suffered its first major blow with the French Revolution. It was Count Richard Elhiro von Coudenhove-Kalergi, henceforth referred to briefly as Count Kalergi, who in 1950 won the first Coudenhove-Kalergi Prize, now better known as the Charlemagne Prize. This prestigious prize has been awarded every year, but sometimes in alternate years, to world-renowned statesmen for the promotion of European integration, a euphemism for multiculturalism, mass third world immigration, and the slow and covert extinction of the white European people by means of miscegenation, mongrelization, and general interbreeding with the darker races of the Third World. It was Count Kalergi, in his 1925 magnum opus, Practical Idealism, it's in German, who foresaw a future world built on the premise of Jewish supremacy and the subsequent dissolution of all other national ethnicities. All the world's separate races would one day be merged into a single mongrelized mishmash, he predicted confidently, with the single exception of the Jewish people who would remain inviolable and intact. The following passage, forwarded to me only yesterday by one of my correspondents, made me sit up and think. I had no idea Jews were capable of such meticulous coordination, all working in unison like an army of ants or a swarm of bees to bring about a cleverly defined result that had been collectively and tacitly agreed upon in advance. And here it is. Most people still haven't grasped the fact that Jews are the principal exponents of the massive non-white immigration invasion into white countries, and of course, only into white countries. I'm reading this. Is that true or false? Good. Examples include Job Cohen in Holland, Barbara Specter in Sweden, Irvin Cohn in Norway, Annette Kahane, Angela Merkel, and Gregor Gysi in Germany, Gerald Kaufman, and David Cameron in England, Ronit Lentin and Alan Shatter in Ireland, and George Soros and Larry Summers in the USA. Most Jews consciously push for unlimited, non-white invasion into these nations. A century ago, Emma Goldman, Bela Kun, Jacob Javits, Vladimir Lenin, and Bolshevik affiliates followed a similar agenda, working for Jewish power. It must be understood that it's been a long-standing Jewish policy to subvert and genocide whites. That's pretty damn strong, isn't it? I agree it is. But there's more. There's a part two. I'm not going to Go there now. Now, the toxic ideas of Count Coudenhove-Kalergi. Why toxic? Because these are damaging and anti-democratic policies being implemented by neo-Bolshevik zealots within the European Union and elsewhere. Implementing these iniquitous policies will inevitably spell the death of Europe as we know it. The mass immigration program seems to have been maliciously designed to produce the mongrelization of the white European people in their own traditional homelands. The race-mixing agenda of the Kalergi Plan has therefore naturally been seen by many white nationalists as a covert and cowardly form of white genocide. It is a silent genocide that is scheduled to take place surreptitiously over several generations. With its white victims wholly unaware, they are being bred out of existence and replaced by a more brutal underspecies with a lower IQ. Now that sounds pretty rough. Want me to go back to the examples? Okay. The white engineers are racist. They built the reservoirs for water too big, and they will not fill up. If they were not racist, they would have built the reservoirs smaller, much smaller, and then they would have filled up. James Watson, the DNA scientist, said, "There is no law whatsoever, anywhere, stating that people who develop in areas that are great distances from each other all evolved at the same rate." And I've said this before. There but for the grace of God goes John B. Wells, the angry young black man. But I can tell you that if there was a hint of John B. that you know today in John B. the black guy, I would get with the program that's working. And I would clearly see immediately that the black man's program ain't working. It looks like the white guy's program is working pretty well. They seem to be doing pretty well. Now, you know, there's some snaky, smarmy bastards in that group too. Got to watch out for them. But overall, the program is working. I've also said white people haven't accomplished anything. Really? I mean, what have we done? Came out of the cave and made steel, went to the moon after building airplanes that first just kind of puttered around, but then went from biplanes to jets in about 7 years, okay? Split the atom, cured disease, built ships that sail on the surface of the ocean, built ships that don't sail, they just travel beneath the surface of the ocean. Cured disease, built civilization. While all these African Americans who know nothing about Africa, and they're not African at all except by bloodline, they want to go back to Africa. They treat the white tour guides like trash. And in about a week, they're screaming and clawing at the door of the airliner to get in and let them get out of here, because those black people in Africa do not like black people from this country worth a damn. Ask one sometime. Just do it. Just walk up to a real no-kidding Nigerian, Kenyan, Somalian, somebody from the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is anything but democratic. Ask that black person, man or a woman, what they think of American blacks. And you send me an email and tell me what they say. Take a poll. Don't just stop at one. If you dare, ask a half a dozen. Ask a dozen. Get to the truth. The fact of the matter is, our school system and our civilization has been pulled down from where it was to accommodate mostly non-hackers, who on the one hand say, you're being mean to us, and then on the other hand, we need help. Well, I say this again. They do need help. They do need help. All you have to do is go look at their neighborhoods, and then you will know they need help. Now, somebody recently, I think it was yesterday, said Bolshevik, that's Russian for Democrat, effectively. I'll follow up and make sure that's true. For now, I'm repeating it because I think it is. The idea is, mix it all up, get everybody mad at each other so that they then truly lose their identity, and nobody's willing to help anybody. this division was already there. But the division, the signatures of division, are being enhanced more and more all the time. So when it comes right down to, why is the media doing this? Why is the mass media going down this moronic path? It's because their strings are being pulled to do so. Why does Antifa and Black Lives Matter get all this airtime? Because their mainstream media outlets are instructed to do so. I think we'd better reconnect with our identity. I think we better remember who we are. I think we better remember that none of us were born according to the color we selected there at the factory before we were born. We are here. We have ourselves. We have our consciousness. We have our people. And I think what we'd probably better do is circle the wagons. Because one way or another, these maniacs will not stop. Are people running around raping... Now, I said, are people running around raping black women? Yeah. Are Muslims doing this? That's what it was. Are Muslims? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Remember the Boko Haram and the Nigerian girls and all that? Yeah. Well, those are Muslims raping the black girls because they're the only ones that are handy. I was speaking of the Muslims which have invaded Western Europe and the United States. Now, we don't hear about too much of this stuff here, but when it does occur, and it does, what happens? Instant suppression by the police, instant suppression by the news media. Because they just don't want you to know what's happening to your kids. You know this. When you became a mother, or you became a father, you became a mother or a father to every child in the world. They know this. Which is why they don't want you to know what's happening to these children at the hands of the Muslim refugees, the asylum seekers. And this is my position on this. Out of America. Islam, out. Send it back to the Middle East. Practice it there. Looks like it's working out for you real well over there. But oh no, civilizational jihad. Rape the women and force them to have the Muslim child. That is the thought process of the savage, and that is what we are dealing with. Speaking of savage, no, not Michael Savage, a savage attack on oneself. How about Mr. Comey just falling apart? How about Chris Matthews saying, how about NBC going, it's like, You people are just a little bit overzealous in trying to prosecute somebody that you've been instructed to prosecute. Probably some of these actors, some of these musicians, and some of these people in the Ministry of Smoke and Mirrors, if you get them away from the building and they are pretty confident that you're not wearing a wire or you don't have a cell phone open or recorder going on you somewhere, they would probably tell you that they think it's BS. Not all of them. The vast majority of them are true believers, but there are some inside the media apparatus that know exactly what's going on. But they want to be a media star. They want that job. They want that anchor position. They want to show up on the TV every night if possible, wearing a helmet, wearing a bulletproof vest, wearing a parka, standing in the rain, with an umbrella and or a rain hat, like one of those old fisherman's hats, the yellow one, the yellow raincoat. They don't care what they're wearing. They'd wear a diaper on their heads if they could get some airtime. They want to be stars. They like being recognized at the supermarket. They like being thought of as special. Well, are they? Not really. They're just people, and they do what they're told. Unlike you and me and the Caravan to Midnight crew and the caravanners all along the caravan line. Now, I'm sure that what I just read to you is going to evoke all kinds of cries of this, that, and the other, but the fact is, the facts are. This is what's happening, and it has been orchestrated, and we need to stop it. And a clear message needs to be sent to our elected leaders. Either you stop it, or we will have to, because we are not going to simply let our generations, past and generations to come, go away because you have some grandiose idea of turning the population of planet Earth into mocha-colored beauties. You're sick. And you're going to go a little bit too far one day, and you're going to be pulled by your faces off of your thrones and kicked in your fat, sorry backsides until you're not even fit for glue. Just remember what happened to Benito Mussolini. This is the fate that awaits you if you go too much farther. We are not going to be victimized, but up to a point. And after that, the gloves come off. No padding, bare knuckles. We good here? All right, good. All right, then. Let's talk to Kelleigh Nelson for a minute, shall we? Hey, Kelleigh Nelson, how you doing?
Just fine. How are you, John?
Oh, just too good for my own good. Say, it's been a little while since we talked. How about all this Comey stuff and this leaking stuff? And I'll tell you, it's just wild out there. It's going to take a while to digest all of this, but it looks like Comey may be kind of a good guy, but can't be too good of a guy because of the environment that he's in, or he could be just a complete, I've gotten my right pectoral muscle caught in the ringer.
Yeah, I think he put his foot in his mouth a couple times today. So that's really a good thing. And I do think the guy is a liar. And he's been connected to the Clintons for many, many years. So do I trust him at all? No.
Mm-mm. Okay. Well, let's just have your comments. I'm gonna look, this is your time, so rather than me go, well, so you're saying, and other popular talk show phrases like that, just...
You know, there's been so much that... Where am I going to start with this? I'll tell you what, our president needs to get rid of all the civil servants that were hired by previous administrations.
You bet.
That's the bottom line here. And I've read, who was it? Was it Napolitano, or it was somebody, some big shot that said, no, you can't get rid of them. If they're very hard to get rid of. Well, if they're so hard to get rid of, why is it that in 2009, Obama got rid of 12,000 of them?
Well, because they're lying. I mean, that's the short answer. They're not hard to get rid of. You send a pink slip over saying, you're fired. You have 2 hours to clean out your desk, because in 2 hours and 1 minute, the security people are going to come up there and throw your ASS out. So get packing. That's all you do. It's easy.
Thank you for your service. We no longer need you. And bye-bye at 5 o'clock tonight.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen. But it needs to happen across the board. Then if you still have leaks, you know it's coming from inside your own people that you've appointed. So when's that going to happen? Because if that doesn't happen soon, there's going to be a lot more trouble for this man. The latest little thing, besides all this Comey stuff, which we need to let this settle down and see what happens so that we can really have a good overview of what the guy's done. But the latest thing is that these leakers exposed conversation that was basically a squabble between the two of them, and that Sessions offered his resignation and Trump refused it. Have you heard about this?
I've just heard a little rumble, but no details.
Okay. Well, allegedly, Trump is angry that he recused himself from, I used to talk really fast when I was from the North, but now I talk so slow. When I listen to myself, I think, spit it out, girl, will you? But
that's okay.
Allegedly, Trump was angry because Sessions recused himself from this whole media falsehood on this Russian involvement in the election. But he also recused himself from going after the Clintons, and that was done during the confirmation hearings. Okay? So Trump blamed him for that and has been angry at him since then. But this little squabble actually happened before Trump even went on his overseas trip. So this is coming out late. But there are several other things to this. Sessions has said, we have a responsibility to be strong. Well, I know that Jeff Sessions is just a really kind, nice gentleman, but he should not have recused himself from either one of these things. What he should have said, this is my take on it, is, look, I've been hired to do a job, and I'm not going to let any prejudicial interference happen here. I will do the job to the best of my ability. That's what he should have done. Backing down is always what the left wants, and they're so thrilled when that happens. So here you've got Trump getting angry at him and still yapping about it. Well, he also accused, this is alleged, okay, because this came out in all the Democrat papers. He also allegedly accused Sessions of not putting into the Supreme Court the first travel ban, which was stronger, but putting the second one in, which was weaker. Well, in my article that I just finished about this, I said, wait a minute, President Trump. You oversee the DOJ, so the buck stops with you. So if you wanted the first travel ban sent to the Supreme Court, why didn't you tell the DOJ that? It's not Sessions' fault because Trump signed off on it. See? So you've got some strong men fighting a little bit here. And when I go back and I think this is all leadership. Trump is in a new position. He's a businessman. He's not a politician. And I'm seeing him learn slowly. I love the guy. I think what he just did with this Paris Accord is wonderful. He needs to even go farther and get rid of some other things. But back to this. He made the same kind of mistake that Sessions made back when he allowed his vice president to talk him into firing General Flynn. Okay? What he should have said to both those men, he should have called them in his office. Now, we'll never know what the whole story was there. But I've stayed in touch with General Flynn, with his brother, and with his son, and they really appreciate the fact that America is praying for them and that he will come out vindicated and over with all of this stuff attacking this poor man. But what Trump really should have done is called these two boys in and said, look, you're my vice president and you're my national security advisor. The two of you kiss and make up and get back to work, because if we allow the left to destroy even one of us, they will come after all of us.
I don't understand why common sense isn't being employed, but then again, I don't understand why, if common sense is so uncommon, why it's called common sense. Maybe we should rename it uncommon sense. Look, I think Sessions recused himself because he wanted to maintain the appearance of propriety and nothing more, because he's, by all accounts, he's a pretty good guy, and you're always going to have somebody on the left saying, oh, he's a racist and he's this and that, and he's like, shut up, and the left is a bunch of trash, and they will remain that way until they decide to leave the left and show through their works after a probationary period that they're not trash anymore. In the meantime, they are, in my opinion. I reject them and their whole damn ideology out of hand. Excuse me, ma'am.
I agree with you.
I despise the whole stinking lot of them. Okay?
What'd you say?
I said I despise the whole stinking lot of them.
Oh, I do too. But I'll tell you honestly, I think Trump has some leakers in his own appointees.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunate that he doesn't really understand the establishment connections. And I think I'm going to be real honest with you here, and I don't care who knows it because I've said it in articles. I think one big problem he has is Vice President Pence. Pence was chosen by Ivanka, okay? And there were several things that happened with Pence, even prior to the election, that ticked people off, and especially people in Indiana who knew him.
Kelleigh, I'm thinking you're thinking that the leakers are inside Mr. Trump's own cabinet.
I do. I think there's quite a few of them. But the one that I look at the most often is his vice president. Why? Because that vice president spent 12 years in Congress. He's buddy-buddy with a lot of the establishment boys. And there were several things that he pulled even prior to the election. Mike Pence withdrew his name for the governorship earlier than Trump wanted him to, and the Indianapolis Star immediately got a hold of it. So the day before Trump was going to announce him, Pence made it clear that he was the choice. That was a bit of a no-no. But then, secondly, when they were campaigning, and that audio of, or video, whatever it was, of Trump talking to that Bush fellow, and all the nastiness came out, Vice President Pence, instead of just keeping his mouth shut, just was horrified, like this man has been a purist all his life. I don't believe that. And then thirdly, this is all prior, he announces his approval for the election of McCain and Ryan, and I forget who the other one was, all of them leftist Republicans, prior to Trump doing it. Now, did Trump know? Who knows? Maybe Trump knew and said, that's fine, we don't care. But Indiana people tell me that he would not have been reelected had he not been chosen by Trump for vice president. And there's several things that he voted on while in Congress that are just exactly the antithesis of what Trump stands for. He only received a 62% freedom index while he was in Congress. That's not very good for a Republican. He was really a man that was for Senator Cruz to begin with. He was for all the trade agreements, including TPP, which Trump has pulled us out of, thank God. And he said the call to ban Muslims, this was all while he was in Congress, the call to ban Muslims was just against the Constitution, and that the border should be open. I mean, this guy sounds like a Democrat. So why did he choose him? I suppose he chose him because he felt that he needed somebody who would be an inside establishment person and could get along with the Congress. That's my guess. I don't like him. I don't trust him. I will never trust him, especially because of what happened with General Flynn and what continues. I don't know who the other ones are, but I'll tell you, Sessions, Flynn, and Bannon were, in my estimation, the three best people he chose. I think Betsy DeVos is just a nightmare. I'm not real happy with Tillerson, who wanted him to stay in this horrible, horrible Paris Accord. We can talk about that, you know. There was a bunch of stuff that came out on the Paris Accord that was very interesting. In fact, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Trump actually followed the Constitution with the Paris Accord, and he should continue to do even more. Did you happen to see the article that came out by McCarthy on PJ Media about this?
I did not.
Okay. Did you happen to, you probably didn't, but Rush Limbaugh talked about it. What it was, you know, Obama actually signed this Paris Accord, but it did not go through the the Senate, which needs a 2/3 vote to sanction, to ratify a treaty. It did not go through. Just like Clinton's Kyoto Treaty was not a Senate ratification, it was just a signature. So both George W. Bush undid it, withdrew, and Trump withdrew. And of course, the Democrats huff and puff and get all upset and everything about this. But these men had the right to do it. Well, the article that came out and the talk that Limbaugh gave, it was pretty scary, because there's something that Nixon signed in 1970 called the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. They call it the Treaty on Treaties. Have you ever heard of such a thing? I haven't.
No.
I never heard of that before.
What is it again?
It's the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties.
The law
Yeah, the Law of Treaties. And it was not ratified by the Senate either. It was
gotcha.
just...
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I misunderstood. I couldn't hear you clearly. Yeah, this thing that Nixon pulled, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
The Treaty of Treaties? Yeah, it's the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They call it the Treaty on Treaties.
Yeah.
And Nixon just signed it. It was not ratified by the Senate either.
And therefore it's not legal.
Therefore, that's truly the bottom line. But there were an awful lot of people saying, well, you can't get out of this, because even though Obama said it's not a treaty, it was a treaty according to the Treaty on Treaties. It was a treaty. Oh, man, what a nightmare this is. Basically, this comes down to the fact that a lot of these people say, well, because of this Treaty on Treaties, this is going to take years and years to get out of this. No, it's not. It wasn't ratified. Constitutionally, what Nixon did, what Clinton did with Kyoto, and what Obama did is unconstitutional. And it states right in our Constitution that they need the consent of 2/3 of the U.S. Senate, and only if the agreement does not contravene the Constitution. Well, all of these agreements do contravene the Constitution, so basically they're null and void. So all Trump did was follow the Constitution. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that think this Treaty on Treaties is still valid. It isn't. And what should happen is Trump should immediately do the same thing with it that he did with the Paris Accord and withdraw it. You know, just undo the dang thing. We don't need it. We have a Constitution that says everything. Yep.
Isn't it just wonderful how incandescent Germany and France are over blowing out the Paris Agreement?
Oh, yeah.
It's a scream.
And China too. And China is, what is it, 30% of the emissions come from China?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and they claim that we're the second most dirty country.
I got to tell you, Kelly, I got to tell you something. On ARC Midnight, the radio adjunct to Caravan to Midnight's live radio program, 9 to midnight Central Time on radio station KLIF, and it's going to go up on the Ever11 XDS satellite, and it'll be beamed into a station near you in the not-too-distant future. I did something I almost never do. Well, I'm not going to say that. Actually, I do it every once in a while. And that is, I conducted a prayer and asked everybody to, we're going to do this here in a little bit, and we're all going to do it together. Yeah. And the prayer was, Father, please help us.
That's right.
Let these things which are concealed from us be revealed. And boom. Now people go, oh, that's just a coincidence. It was going to happen anyway. Well, maybe, maybe not. I guess we'll never know. All I know is that thousands upon thousands of caravanners and ARC writers prayed in unison that Father would reveal this to us. And there it is in a big banner across the TV screen. Comey admits to being one of the leakers. Seriously. Right. So forget what I said about him being a nice guy. I've said he was a putz from the beginning, and I was just feeling altruistic for a minute. I felt empathy for him. You know what? How can you feel empathy for somebody who is the top cop in the nation? Oh, but he's one of the leakers. Oh, and he's the one who was with Lockheed Martin. Oh, yeah, he's the one isn't his brother the lawyer for the Clinton Foundation?
That's right. Well, and here's the other thing. Why is he taking notes only for Trump? He said he took notes for Trump because he felt he was a liar. And he wanted to keep track.
Well, it's the same reason that some people think that some judges out there have a little bit too much sympathy for the criminals. It's because they're criminals themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
Same syndrome. Sorry.
Yeah, but here's the other thing, too. This man stuck his foot in it by saying he purposely leaked to a buddy, hoping the buddy would get it to the newspapers. What? I mean, you've convicted yourself right there. So why are they listening to anything more this man has to say? Really? I don't get it. And he never followed through with anything. He should have turned Clinton over to, that's old news, but he should have turned Clinton over, even if Loretta Lynch would have done nothing. He still should have gone through with his job and turned her over to Loretta Lynch, don't you think?
No.
No?
Not over to Loretta Lynch. She's just as dirty as the rest of them.
Well, of course she is, but she was the one that it had to be turned over to.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, the thing about it is, I cannot refrain from getting a little bit radical with it. But every once in a while, I'll pray for the Lord to put a guard over my mouth so that not too much stuff comes spewing out there. And sometimes, when he's busy doing something else, I guess I subconsciously reach up there and try and take the guard off, and then I start spewing again. The fact is, the moment that this weak excuse of an FBI director makes all this hubbub about the big email, Hillary's private email account. Well, it was a private email account, you lying old thing. It was a private server that you were doing government business on. So first Comey comes out with, it's a big deal. Then it's like, well, there's no prosecutor will take this. Then, just before the election, it's a big deal again. Right there, he revealed himself as being weak, scared, and guilty in that order. Well, maybe I could reverse the order. How about guilty, scared, and weak? There you go. And I think Trump did exactly the right thing, Mr. Trump, that is, by firing him. I think it's excellent.
Oh, yeah, I do too. And I'm kind of glad that he waited a little while. I'm glad he didn't just go in and do it immediately. A lot of people say that he should have, but I think waiting and watching is a better idea. Then you've got a better scope on what's happening with these people.
Yeah, they waited until he was out in L.A. and went into and fired him while he was in L.A. so they could go in his office and take anything out of there that might otherwise have disappeared if they'd given him a heads up. I mean, this is the way it is, folks. These people are not nice people. There are some nice people up there, but by and large, they are not nice. They're always friendly, but they're almost never nice. So remember it. Yeah.
Well, there's another thing here, John, the deal with this Mueller being appointed. I don't trust Mueller.
Yeah, he's bad news, too.
My God. And Ron Rosenstein he's the second in command under Sessions. Isn't that right? Is it Rod Rosenstein? Rod Rosenstein? Isn't that?
I'm afraid you're asking the wrong guy on that. I don't know, and I should, but I don't.
That's what it is. I don't like him either, and I don't trust him to really do. He's the one that appointed Mueller. So these two are in bed together. This is not looking good. I think, why aren't they getting rid of these people?
Yes.
That's my big question. And doesn't Sessions have a right to get rid of people himself in the DOJ? Doesn't he?
Wait a minute.
You're not sure?
Let me have the question again. You got me thinking about something else. I lost track.
Doesn't Sessions, as the Attorney General, have the right to get rid of anybody in the Department of Justice that he wants to get rid of?
Absolutely he does.
Okay, so why isn't he getting with the president and saying, I don't trust these people. And why isn't the president saying, look, here's the really bad thing. Trump has chosen all these establishment people. And I wrote another article, a message to the president, time to pull the plug on the swamp.
I'm looking at it right now.
And I said, what we need to do is go out here where all these people that worked themselves into exhaustion to get him elected and spent their own money for 18 months working parts of every state and that have superb backgrounds. Why aren't you calling them up? I just recently heard that he was actually going to go back to some of these people, people that even worked with Corey Lewandowski. And have you had Roger Stone on lately? I ought to get him back on too.
No, I haven't had Roger Stone on lately. He hasn't been on in a while.
Yeah, well, you need to get him back on, but...
Well, we'll see.
Okay, there's a man here who was our 5-term sheriff, 33 years in law enforcement. I'm just going to use him as an example because there's guys like him and women all over the country that would do a fabulous job for Trump, and they don't have connections to the establishment cabal and the globalists. Okay?
I wish he'd call me up and tell me he wants me to be his press secretary. I'd say, let me think about it for a second. Okay, I'll do it. I'll be in D.C. in 3 hours.
See, he has 3 people up there, one of whom I know, who actually read all the emails and take the phone calls and then send to him what they think is important. I would love a job like that. That would just be right up my alley, okay? But there's a man here that worked for 18 months, spent all his own money, was a delegate, went to the convention, that has 33 years in law enforcement, 5-term sheriff of Knox County. He worked for 18 months for Trump during the election and spent all his own money and went to the convention and was a delegate, paid for that too. And even when Trump came here, he was head of security because he's 5-term former sheriff. Okay. Now, here's the thing. That man should have been hired for the Trump administration, and especially for something like the DHS. Why? Because he's been trained in Israel on terrorism. He's been trained by the FBI on every category you can be trained on. He flies helicopters. He was in Rita and Katrina rescuing people off tops of buildings. The man had a 90%, what do you call it? He found the murderers. Who did the murders? In 90% of the murders that happened in Knox County. He was so beloved by the people because he saved the taxpayers so much money. When the schools needed soccer fields, he had previously been in building and excavation. He went and got one of the big machines and he went to all of the schools and made the soccer fields for them. And it was done at no cost. All they did was pay for his gas. That's the kind of guy Trump needs up there, all right? But the Democratic paper here did the same thing to our former sheriff that the Democratic media has done to Trump from the beginning of his announcement as running to now. And they're after him. And this history of these papers writing these lies about these public figures and destroying their reputations so they can't get hired anywhere else, blah, blah, blah. This is a real problem. And I'll tell you what needs to be overturned that I'm leading to with this. Not only should this man have been called up, Tim Hutchison is his name, just the most honorable, decent guy. He should have been called up and put somewhere in this administration. But the other thing that Trump needs to do is to get this 1964 Supreme Court decision, New York Times versus Sullivan. We've talked about this before, where 9-0 on this liberal court, this was the Warren Court, voted that the media has a right to lie about public figures with impunity unless the public figures can prove there was malice. So, and they said it was a First Amendment right of the newspapers and media to lie. So what have we got here? We've got the media just destroying Trump with all these lies. My former sheriff was destroyed with all these lies from the local newspaper. And what do we do about it? Is there something Trump can do? I mean, he talked about this when he gave a speech to 35,000 in Alabama where this originated. He actually told them about this. And he told them because he read my article. But what can he do about this? Because unless we stop this and go back to where these newspapers can be sued for libel and slander, this will continue, and the public isn't getting the truth. I mean, the media on TV, all of them are lying about everything. What do you think?
You know, I'm looking at, where are you?
The Supreme Court decision, 1964. Can that be overturned?
Okay. I wonder if Supreme Court decisions can be revisited and modified or tweaked. Is that within the...
Well, there's stare decisis, see, and there's a lot of people that are really big on stare decisis that are on the Supreme Court. In other words, they don't ever want to go back and redo any previous decision. That's Gorsuch. Gorsuch is a big believer in stare decisis. He does not want to revisit anything, including Roe versus Wade. So could you get enough of them that would say this is wrong? Or do we have too many Democrats that like these lies on the Supreme Court? I don't know. And who would bring it to the court? Who could you get that would even take it to the court, and then would the court even accept it? That's the big question.
Yeah, well, we could ponder that one for a while. You know, and while you were talking there, I was thinking, the Supreme Court makes a decision, and it's based on a sound interpretation of the Constitution. It might be dangerous if you could go back and mess with it later.
Yeah, but so many of them are not done by a sound interpretation of the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that basically says in the First Amendment that the media is allowed to lie by people
well,
about
that's true.
people.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So how can they get away with that? Of course, you see, it was a Warren Court. This is the same court that in '62 took prayer out of school. So, which I wouldn't want prayer in school today, because who's you know, that would be a nightmare today. But nevertheless, this was probably one of the worst Supreme Court decisions ever made. Why? Because we cannot get the truth. Where are people going for the truth? They're going to the internet. They're going to people like you. That's the only place they can find it anymore, John. And it's getting harder and harder. You've seen what's happened with so many people who have told the truth. They either use sex against them, and they get these women to crawl out of the woodwork from 35 years ago and tell these tales that this person assaulted them or was sexually whatever. You know, that goes on, and I'm watching this because this is what they tried it on Trump, didn't they? Sure, they carted out all these women, and then the women disappeared. What happened to them? And it's the same thing, I still think, with a lot of other people. O'Reilly's gone. They tried it on Hannity. They've tried it on other people. You know, get rid of the people that are going to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-mm-mm. Well, I'll tell you, I'm looking at your newswithviews.com site here.
Yeah.
And I really like this. I like some of the quotes that you put up there, and I want people to hear them. Here's one from George Washington. How soon we forget history. Government is not reason. Government is not eloquence. It is force, and like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master.
That's right.
And then there's another good one from Vladimir Lenin, the communist. We can and must write in a language which sows among the masses hate, revulsion, and scorn toward those who disagree with us.
That's right.
Sound familiar, anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Sounds like Goebbels, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like mainstream media.
Yeah, and mainstream media, sure. But, I mean, this has been going on for a long time. I don't know. I'm not happy with Tillerson. I'm not happy with... Priebus really doesn't bother me. I don't know about him. What do you think? What do you think about Priebus?
Out. Out.
Out?
I'd rather go with Bannon than Priebus.
You'd rather go with...
Bannon.
Bannon? Oh, I love Bannon.
Yeah, I think he's probably but from all appearances, he's a good guy and a smart cat, too. I like him. Priebus, yeah. Out of here. See you, Reince.
Yeah. Well, do you think he could be a leaker? Because I really haven't seen... He supported Trump once Trump won the nomination.
Yeah.
He kind of fought for him. So I've not really ever gone after him. And I know he's establishment and all these establishment people. That takes me right back to this. Why, Trump, aren't you hiring these people out here that work themselves silly for you? Huh? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get to him?
What's that?
I mean, how do you get to Trump? How can you get... We used to be able to get to him. We no longer can get to him. And that's a problem. What do you think about Ivanka and Jared and Cohn and was it Tillerson? All of them were for this Paris Accord and tried to talk him into staying in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm loving these headlines. You know, it's not just that Comey admits that he was one of the leakers. He admits to orchestrating the leakers.
Oh, great.
You know, I really wish there was some legal blowback for this. There might be. There really might be. Seriously, when the director of the FBI orchestrates leaks, and these leaks turn out to be based on falsehood that lead nowhere except to a blind alley, meaning one with a brick wall at the end of it, and there's no way out. For a lot of people, it's no wonder that Hillary Clinton is out there babbling like a moron to anybody who will listen to her about how this is the time for us to reach out and get to know people, you know, what they like to read and their food. I mean, what a desperate criminal moron whose brains are now fleeing. That's the thing about the devil. The devil will let you get away with absolutely everything, and then, at just the right time, he removes his protection from you, and the world falls in on you, and the world is falling in on the Clintons. Do you see where Bill's son, it winds up that Twitter confirms it before Bill did, but I mean, this half-black kid looks like Bill, grew up in Arkansas like Bill. I'm thinking this is Bill's love child.
Yeah, he really does look like Bill, too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
A black Bill.
A black Bill.
Maybe that's why they called Bill the first black president.
It's going to have to be half black Bill. You know,
yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Black Bart was a white guy, so I guess we can say Black Bill.
Oh, jeez. God.
Yeah,
well,
I feel sorry for the kid. I really do. I mean, I don't know what it would be like to go out into the public eye with this kind of a story about yourself, but it can't be pleasant for him, you know what I mean?
Well, you know, you've got this former president was actually charged with rape. Clinton, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And what he did in the Oval Office, and then he lied under oath. So,
he's a great guy.
Impeached? No guts, no glory. They impeached him, but they kept him. Why? Look.
Yeah. At first they had a little bit of guts, but then at the end of the line there was no glory. Well, look.
Well, that's the same thing I see, John, with Trey Gowdy. There was a lot of hullabaloo, a lot of yapping against Clinton, a lot of proof over the whole Benghazi nightmare that should never have happened. And what happens? Nothing. And a lot of people said, oh, we need to have Trey Gowdy. We need to have him as the FBI director. And I said, are you people nuts? Why would you want Trey Gowdy, who belongs to Club for Growth, run by, I think it's David McIntosh, and David McIntosh is pro-amnesty, all of Club for Growth is, and they spent $3.3 million in Iowa with negative advertising against Trump and with a little door knocker, little flyers on the doors that were just total lies about Trump so that he wouldn't win in Iowa. Now that's what Trey Gowdy belongs to. Well, does Trey Gowdy believe in amnesty? I don't want Trey Gowdy anywhere near the FBI. So now we've got this gentleman, Christopher Wray. Isn't that his name?
Yes.
Wray, W-R-A-Y. Okay. Wray went to Yale, and I've seen a few things on the web. Everybody's kind of wondering, well, if he went to Yale, is he a skull and bonesman? That'd be a good question to ask. But everything I've seen about the guy so far looks like he's a fairly decent fellow. So I hope that Trump picked a good man this time. The thing that I wonder again is, who are Trump's advisors? Who advises him? Is this all coming again from Vice President Pence? Because I see Pence with him everywhere. You know? I mean, he's right there at his side. Personally, I would like to see the president either lock this guy in a closet for 4 years or send him out of the country 5 days a week. That's what I'd like to see. But who are his advisors? Who's telling him this? His kids? Ivanka and Jared, they're big-time advisors. And by the way, I just did see an article that they're actually thinking about going back to New York. I would approve of that. Go back home and raise your 3 children. We did not elect you, and there were a lot of people that were very disturbed, Ivanka, that you were sitting in the presidential chair between your father and Canada's Trudeau. They didn't like that. And they don't like seeing you, a 35-year-old who is a registered Democrat and who leans towards the left on many subjects, sitting in on all these meetings.
Yeah, I can see that might raise a few eyebrows. Yeah.
So there's been a lot of people that have made comments. When you read websites that have anything to do with Ivanka and Jared, people don't like them. They know that they are left of center, and they don't want them that close to daddy. Now look, I've said he's got to have somebody there in his family. Well, I've seen some changes since Melania got there. Haven't you? Haven't you seen some changes? Don't you think that Melania has a influence on him and more keeping him with what he promised the people? Don't you think that's the case?
Not being able to say that I know for sure, I would, yeah, I think that just from what I sense of her character, and they seem really tight. So yeah, I think she's a strong woman that will. I mean, they've been married a long time, so she's got something going on.
13 years.
I suspect what it is an iron will and a solid set of principles, and she sticks to them and doesn't tolerate any nonsense of any kind.
Yeah. Did you watch any of the film from him being overseas with her? Did you see any of that?
You talking about the hand holding thing?
Yeah, because he reached back to give a low, what do you call it? High five, a low five, okay? And she slapped his hand. And what I figured he was doing was saying, hey, hon, isn't this great? And she slapped his hand and said, you bet. Because the media jumped on that like she was slapping his hand away.
Well, MSM is a bunch of pigs anyway. I think we know that. And now Chris Matthews is saying, Russia-Trump collusion theory came apart with Comey testimony. It's like, yeah, Chris, maybe you should have been a little bit more careful before you decided that it was already in the bag. Well, look, what could we find on exposingmodernmugwumps.com? What is a mugwump anyway?
You aren't going to find much on there because I haven't got time to put as much stuff up as I want. But a mugwump is somebody who basically waves his finger in the air. He keeps his head on one side of the fence and his wump on the other. His mug on one side, his wump on the other, and he waits to find out which way the wind blows, and then that's where he goes.
Oh, gotcha. All right, yeah, that one eluded me.
Yeah, exposing modern mugwumps. Yeah. They used to call old politicians mugwumps because way back in the 1800s they called them mugwumps because that's what they did. They put their finger in the air and let's see which way the wind's blowing. It's the old story of people. I'm from Chicago, so I know this, but people think it's the Windy City because of the wind off the lake. It's not. It was called the Windy City because of the blowhard politicians from Chicago. And we still have the same thing there. In fact, the city is really going down the toilet.
Oh, I'll say it is. It's on the verge of, the whole state's on the verge of filing bankruptcy, primarily because of Chicago.
It's really a mess. And it's sad, but that's what happens when you have Democrats running the whole state.
I would think that somebody would cop to this, but 7 out of 10 of the poorest cities in the country, I think it's 7 out of 10, they're run by Democrats, and they're all broke.
Now look, with this Paris Accord and all of these cities, including Pittsburgh, they want their coal jobs back, okay? And here's this Peduta saying, this mayor of Pittsburgh saying, hey, we're still going to follow the Paris Accord. Well, I'd like to know how all of these people, Bloomberg in New York, what's his name in California, how are they going to follow this? One of the guys in Atlanta said so. Okay, what are they going to do? Everything across the board will be raised, but energy rates would be the highest thing. So if they do that, and then they take that money, that some of it is going to be scraped off for the city that they represent. Then it's going to go to the UN, and more will be scraped off for the corrupt UN. And then the UN allegedly sends it off to corrupt third world dictators in order to bring the third world up, and they keep it for themselves. So these people in these cities where these folks are saying, well, we're still going to go with the Paris Accord. We think it needs to be done. All they're doing is raping the citizens. And these citizens are so stupid and gullible, they just go along with it. It's a wonder that our electorate actually gave us Trump. I mean, it's shocking that we got this president instead of Hillary, isn't it? Whew.
Well, we'll follow you on newswithviews.com, and it's always good to see you and talk with you. I like the way you think, that's for sure.
Okay.
Take care out there. God bless.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, boy. Isn't that fun? Just watching. I said this at the beginning of the program, but I want to say it again because it feels so good. Well, the mainstream media, the Ministry of Smoke and Mirrors, has been proven to be just that. You're just full of it. Got to chase down that story. We're going to get this president. You didn't get anybody but yourselves. You have even less credibility than you did, say, yesterday. Pathetic. Really pathetic. And I think they should be punished by having hundreds of thousands of people contact their sponsors and say, we're not buying your product. You know why? Because you support fraudulent news. Don't call it fake news. It's fake news. That goes by too quick. Fraudulent takes a little longer to say, and there's a little more time for it to sink in. Their agenda is clearly to be seen, is it not? It is. Well, I am hopeful. I may sound a little cynical, and sometimes I am. But I'm hopeful that this is going to be a really bad year and a really bad, 3.5 years for the people on the left. Notice how the strident, may I say, idiots, suddenly they're quieting down a little bit. Yeah, because they had their run. They were shown to be idiots, or the next thing to it, and that they do what people like that always do. They just go away and pretend like it never happened. But we're not going to forget. And the reason we're not going to forget is because we don't want it to happen again. Most people just want to hear, oh yeah, Comey, okay, looks like Trump's cleared. President Trump, Mr. Trump, not just Trump. He's doing or trying to do the will of the vast majority of the people. Did you hear where somebody got kicked out of the gay pride parade for supporting Donald Trump? That's what happens. They turn on their own because that's just the kind of sub-dogs they are. And I'm not going to be nice to these people. Why should I? Politics affects everything. You may not be interested in politics, but it's very, very interested in you, just like war. So keep the heat on, keep the pressure on, and just tell them, you support this kind of rubbish? I'm talking about the sponsors of these and the stations themselves. You continue to push this stuff out, we will run you out of business. You think the Georgia Guidestones are scary? Wait till we have your names and addresses and everybody who traces you in your line chiseled deeply into the hardest granite we can find so that your names and your companies that are now defunct can be remembered for generations in shame, as they should be. Okay. Wow. If you're watching this on YouTube, come on and join us. We've got a good deal for you. Just go to the Caravan to Midnight homepage and check it out. If you're interested in money and what's going to happen to you financially, whether you want it to or not, and some ideas, if you want some ideas on how to avoid what will happen to you, whether you want it to or not, if you're not wise to what the plans are for you, if you would like that, then join us. And you can join for $80, and you can get 3/4 of a year of a $259 subscription from Joe Meyer's Straight Money Analysis, and a year of Caravan to Midnight, $60 normally, $259 for Joseph, for $80. $80, 80. Adjusted for inflation, that's not very much money. It really isn't. So avail yourself of the opportunity. It won't last forever, but it's going to go on for a while. But don't think, well, I'll get to it later. No, get to it while you can, because one day you're going to go, that's a good idea, and you're going to go to the site, and our little promotion is going to be over. So don't miss it. Take advantage of it. You're going to like it. We're on program 750-something now. And so I want you to join us, because Caravan to Midnight is entirely member-supported. Entirely. And in fact, the Caravanners made this little YouTube presentation possible. So come on, we're waiting for you. We'd love to have you. All right, stand by. We're going to have an interesting conversation with a young woman who has gone through the same tortures of the almost damned that many other children, teenagers, and young adults have gone through. What a story she has to tell. Stand by.